Warning, this episode contains some audio and/or video glitches. It was not your equipment.
Hey gang, just a brief intro into Music Weeks. Here they are now. I was also considering going down the list of all the people that you see over the Music Weeks to be part of each episode, let you know who's coming or who may have been or whatnot. The list has grown. Too big to really go into here. I don't want to take that much time. Music Weeks, thankfully, has grown into a pretty big deal. So it's grown a lot more than just the one Music Week it originally was going to start out as into multiple weeks now. So at any rate, rather than ramble more, let's go ahead and get into this particular day's Music Weeks episodes, and I'm trying to drop them Monday through Friday each week of Music Weeks. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care. God bless. As Graham Norton would say, let's get some guests on.
Welcome to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP. I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show!
For sure.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Constitutionalist Politics Podcast. You're joining an episode of Music Weeks, and joining me today is Adam Blaylock of Heart Songs, the podcast. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you so much, Joseph.
Yeah, and I got to apologize because on my 15 plus social media platforms, I had already threw out there that I'm going to be on Heart Songs, the podcast, in like April or May. I called you Adam Blaylock instead of Adam Blaylock. It's like hours later, and typo.
Yeah, it happens all the time. No worries.
Yep. And for the benefits of the audio only or those reading the transcript, those behind the scenes video can see Music Weeks. I already recorded a few shows, but now I'm thinking for Music Week, I'm digging into my closet and digging up concert shirts. So today I happen to be wearing an autographed shirt from Rick Springfield. Normally stays hidden in the closet, so the signature won't fade. But since I mentioned Springfield in my Heart Songs that will appear on your show, I figured I'd dig that up.
Yeah, awesome.
I mean, it makes sense. I used to have like probably 1,000 different shirts, but at some point I was like, I can't keep all these, gave a lot of them away. So I'm going through the closet. What ones do I still have even, right?
Yeah.
So at any rate, before we dive into your podcast and how that came about, it is Music Week, so right, cue the Who. Who are you? Who? Where were you born and raised, and where are you now? All that kind of good stuff.
Great questions. Born Mesa, Arizona, raised Mesa, Arizona. I'm a very, very native Phoenix Valley of the Sun, Arizona boy. I mean, I don't know, been around, lived in like Sacramento and Pittsburgh and a few different places, but very, very much from here. I don't know. What's my story? I was raised religious. I was raised Mormon, which ties into a documentary that I made that you can find on YouTube about going back and kind of retracing the steps of my Mormon mission. But outside of that, I was a big basketball fan. That was actually one of my first dreams in life. I wanted to play in like the NBA, but
So Phoenix Suns, I take it.
oh yeah, like the '92 roster of the Suns was one of my heart songs. I'll tell you what, like it is just where basketball was great, you know.
Of course, I'm not much of a basketball fan, but the Detroit Pistons Bad Boys Day, definitely was tuned in then.
Yeah, for sure. So then, from basketball, I like to draw a lot. So then my dream kind of phased into animation. Wanted to work for Disney for a long time, and the shortest version of the story is when I was 12 years old and my family moved to Sacramento, and we lived there for about 3 years, and we moved back to Arizona 3 years later, and I was 15, and all of my friends had gone from, I don't know, what were we watching back then, like Full House and Family Matters and Saturday morning cartoons and stuff, to like all of them had grown out their hair and were listening to this like alternative grunge rock music, and so I just got this aggressive introduction to this type of music. I mean, I'd been listening to 90s country like Garth Brooks and Martina McBride and stuff like that, and so I just got catapulted into this whole different genre, and through that found the guitar, and it just became one of those things where the music had so much passion to it, and I wanted to learn how to express that I couldn't not pick up the guitar and try to be in a band. And then that basically set up the next 20 years of my life, where I was just in and out of all sorts of original bands and tribute bands, and you name it. Just the whole life and career of music, which, kind of leads us to the doorstep of the new podcast.
Yeah, before you get to the podcast, what was one or two of the tribute bands? What did you tribute band to?
Great question. I feel like I'm embarrassed to admit it now. At the time, I feel like I kind of had a big head about it, but I fronted a Foo Fighters tribute band. So like I sang and played guitar in that, and that was a blast. I mean, now that I look back on it, like I had nothing to bring to that role. I don't look like Dave and I don't really sing like him, but whatever. But that got me in the same, like playing gigs alongside and what have you, several different bands, which eventually landed me the bass guitar and backup vocal role in an Alice in Chains tribute band, which might have been one of my favorite bands ever. Like I knew their radio hits when I jumped into the band, but learning a lot more of their discography and genuinely and honestly, so much fun interacting with fans that show up to hear that music, because it's kind of a combination of hard rock. So you really get to I don't know, march around and bang your head. But you really, it's funny how Jerry Cantrell, the guitar player from Alice in Chains, describes them as a heavy blues band. Like that, he doesn't even associate them with grunge and alternative, which is where they kind of got lopped in. Like to him, it's like a metal blues band. So when you get real deep into their discography, like it's really well written music. And I mean, anybody that's familiar even with just the harmonies, these really dissonant chromatic harmonies. So it was just super fun to both be able to kind of like stretch my wings and I guess play really complex music and also just have a great time connecting with
I had several Alice in Chains discs over the years. So I can appreciate the stuff that people generally don't hear, that deeper stuff that most people don't know is there, that once you open that door and get into it, it's like, wow, there's a lot more depth to these people than the tunes I just hear on the radio, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But anyway,
but outside of that, I mean, just a breadth of experience. I got a chance a couple of years ago to be in a Real Big Fish tribute band, which just took everything that I've been enjoying from, like the kind of hard rock punk appeal of like Foo Fighters and then sort of the metal angle of Alice in Chains, and just throw all that out the window and go into this like ska world, which is a whole different vibe. And again, it's one of those things where like we'd play bars sometimes with people who really didn't even know who Real Big Fish was. They might have heard Sell Out on the radio, but for the most part had no idea. Just engage with super danceable music without having to know what it was, and to really, I guess, deeper understand the appeal of not only ska music, but specifically how brilliant Real Big Fish was, that it really is just great music. And either you're going to walk away and go buy a CD because you want to hear that song again, or you're just going to have a good time in the moment, and it kind of doesn't really matter what happens after that.
Yeah. And along the way, you came across Weezer, which landed up being the genesis. See what I did there? Christian joke, right? The genesis for what led into Heart Songs, the podcast. Explain a little bit about that Weezer kind of light bulb moment of, whoa, this would make a good podcast format.
It's a great question. The irony is I'm not even, well, I was going to say I'm not even that big of a Weezer fan. I don't know if that's true because I
having audio issue there.
Obsessively addicted to the Red album, which is where, but I guess my point is it's the main thing I think that I ever listened to. It was always kind of, but basically the short version of the story is I heard the album when it first came out back in 2008 and loved a handful of songs on it. Like, I don't think it's even like a brilliant album front to back, but I think there's some real
you froze. Oh, you froze for a minute there, but you're back.
And one of them is Heart Song. Okay.
Yeah. And
so for anybody who hasn't heard it, doesn't know what it is, like Heart Songs is this ballad, like this rock ballad that's on Weezer's Red album that basically is Rivers Cuomo, the singer, like telling the story of his life in music. He starts as a kid and all of the artists like Gordon Lightfoot and what have you that influenced him then, and then the second verse gets more into like his teenage years and radio hits and different things and stuff that he was hearing in his house, and the third verse gets into like picking up guitar and Slayer and Judas Priest and stuff until it eventually lands on Nirvana's Nevermind album, and how that like really just cracked him open artistically. And now that he knew how to play guitar, he was given sort of a purpose, I guess, with like that style of music, really unlocked what he wanted to do. And then he went on to, form Weezer and play shows. But the Heart Songs hook, I guess you could say, in it is that he's describing all the songs that he's growing up with as his heart songs, because they're things that inspire him and mean something to him. And then he explains that as Weezer became a thing, people would come up to him about his music and say, this is the song. This is my heart song, like about stuff he wrote and recorded. So it's a real, as an artist, it was extra special to me to see through his perspective how he got to embody the shoes, I guess you could say, of his heroes by becoming other people's heroes. And from the first time I heard it, I thought to myself, like, it would be so rad to hear other artists' stories in this format where you can kind of like hear what influences took them to where they are. At no point in thinking that was I thinking about it in the format of a podcast, even though I think they existed at the time. They started back in 07 or 08 or something like that. And I was nerdy enough to listen to like Kevin Smith and Ricky Gervais and the early podcasters. But back then it wasn't something that just anybody could do. So it never would have connected. So, fast forward to, I don't know, within the last couple of years, basically I'd started a podcast. Oh, when did I start it? 2017, that eventually was called the Gaia Carta Podcast, where I just drove around and talked out my thoughts. And at some point I got to do guest interviews, and it was really fun and a lot of content that I'm really proud of. But at some point, like COVID hit and the guests just got harder to line up, and I got kind of bored with myself. And so I just assumed the audience was too. And so I just shut it down. I'm like, I don't think that's going to work.
Even though there were more people kind of trapped, lockdowns in their home, and there was more audience really for podcasts, you just kind of were burnt out to a degree.
I mean, if anything, I think what you're describing was the problem, because before that, there were content creators and there was audience. When COVID hit, you were so stuck in your house that a lot of the audience became content creators to try to entertain themselves. And so what ends up happening is your content that was already questionably entertaining is now has to compete even with some of the people that were like listening to your podcast. So like, if you're not just killing it with whatever story you're trying to tell or whatever guest stories you're trying to tell, you might as well just get out of it. And that's kind of how I felt. I was like, it's oversaturated, and I just need to get out of it. Like it's a waste of my time. And
well,
so
tie that together with the heart songs concept.
Right.
In a way, your podcast became someone else's heart song and inspiration to do maybe what they're doing.
Yes. I mean, that's the short version tie through. Yes. I mean, it's a situation where I was out of podcasting for a good 2 or 3 years. And I started to feel the itch to get back into it just because I enjoy it as a medium. And I'm an artist, so I like to create and put stuff out there. But the itch, I would argue with the itch and be like, dude, you don't have anything to say. Like, there's just no point until eventually, honestly, there's a deeper story that I really need to sit down and remember all the little moments that I had and like write it all out. So when I'm asked this question, I can be more specific. But there was just kind of these lightning strike moments of inspiration along the way that eventually brought that idea artist to tell their story back to mine. And then it was just a really tricky space of time where I was talking to some other creative friends of mine and trying to like knead the dough and work the idea out. Originally, I was going to do it kind of like you're doing it as a Zoom podcast where it was like a whole interview thing. And I was going to say you might be shocked at how many people weren't interested, but I'm sure you have your own struggles in getting guests for your show. I know how that is. It's not my favorite either. So it was just kind of months and months of trying to like pitch the show to friends and try to see if they want to do it, and then have them either just straight up say no, ghost me, or be sweet enough to be like, no, and here's why, and using that feedback to be like, okay, what is the method? What's the format that I can do this in that's going to, A, be something interesting for an audience to enjoy, but B, something that an artist is going to be, I guess, motivated to want to be a part of? And that was where I thought, okay, maybe instead of scheduling interviews, which was kind of part of what was shutting it down, like people just, it's weird, after COVID, people just seem to have less scheduled time, which I can't 100% figure out, but I can also relate to because my life is busy too. And so it just turned into, what if I just have them record answers to these questions, send it in to me, and then it's on me to like put the episode together and make it something entertaining. I did it once with my older brother, who's an author, as just kind of a test episode. And I sent it to a handful of those people that shot me down. And most of them were like, I'm in. And weirdly from there, it's just been like this snowball of people like finding out what the show is, maybe going out and listening to an episode and then being like, dude, way to bring like a fresh format to this boring podcasting crap. And me just being like, I mean, thanks. It took a while, but I think this is good.
Well, aside from Music Weeks that I'm going to run episodes Monday through Friday with guests, I don't push my show. I'm on disability. I have health issues, so I indeed cheat and use Zoom to do it. And I only drop shows normally twice a week. Wednesday will be a guest show. Saturday will be a Christian or politics or both or whatever monologue show. So I'm only doing 2 a week. So indeed, it is less difficult to get guests. And I've got a few months of guests recorded out, except for now that, hey, Music Weeks, I want to try to turn it into Music Months. So now I'm behind, putting everybody, if you're looking behind the scenes, I'm holding up the clock behind the 8 ball and on the clock. No, we got to record now. Otherwise, hey, you want to record in a month, 2 months? Okay, that's fine. But no, now it's kind of like, ooh, well, I kind of put the pressure on that I'm doing this. So in a way, a lot of times that's it, right? If you don't really put any real pressure on yourself, then, we're all human, we're all frail, we're all flawed. We can all get a bit lazy.
Yeah, for sure.
I gave you my heart songs, and I don't want to go into them here. I ask people, check out Heart Songs, the podcast, in whatever, April, May, June, whatever the episode with me lands up coming out, because I know you're recorded a bit ahead like I am, so don't have a date certain that it'll drop yet, but I asked that they watch for that. And of course, you'll let me know when it drops, and I'll shoot it across my social media and whatnot that it's out. Your first question is, first song, tell me about a song you grew up with, something from your childhood that means something to you and has stuck with you to this day. What is your answer to that?
I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to answer the question, and I'm curious if you'll back my artistic reason for not answering the question. I don't have any idea how long Heart Songs is going to last. I don't know when guests are going to dry up. I don't know any of that. Right now, I know I have X amount built out, and I'm always, on the prowl. Obviously, you and I met, and we're swapping episodes, so it is going because it is going. If the day ever comes that it stops, I am going to be the last episode of Heart Songs. And on that episode, I will tell my Heart Songs and I will tell my stories. Up until that point, I feel like it would just really be, not that anybody really cares. I've had a few friends, even past guests, be like, I want to hear your Heart Songs. But I enjoy the tension that exists there, that it's like, no, if the show ever shuts down, I'll be the last episode and you can hear my Heart Songs. Which is also ironic because you, as a guest of the show, the truth is, I just put examples there, and they may or may not actually be my Heart Songs, but at the bottom of each question is an example from me to try to give the guests an idea of what's happening. So you have an idea.
I have your email right here, which I made quick notes to each of the question, and then I recorded and sent to you within an hour of you emailing me the concept, because I really love the concept. And I agree. Once people hear the concept, it's great and people want to be involved. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. Why share yours until potentially later? Because then in a way, you want to avoid giving people a suck up answer. Right? They know what yours is, so they want to tell you what they think you want to hear rather than them giving an honest answer, which doesn't help things.
And people have done that. And to be honest with you, I mean, not that I'm going to point fingers, because I wouldn't want anybody to be deterred from a particular episode just because I might have an opinion about it.
You're going to get calls after this airs,
like,
how dare you out me? I know you were talking about me.
There's definitely some episodes where you could tell people are just pandering to what they think like an audience might be interested that their song being, versus other times like the pull is just so deep and personal, and the story is so personal. And like, you got the show, in my opinion, and that this is where the show shines. When you're telling something from your personal experience versus like, oh yeah, this song was big on the radio when I was a teenager, so it's my Heart Song. I'm like, well, that's not really, but okay, I get it.
I gave you 17 minutes of material, which of course you might be able to cut down some, but indeed, very seriously, and some might say I rambled a bit, but I gave specific reasoning in different parts of why is the answer, not just, it's not yes or no questions. Right? Like one of the examples, that first question, you put example, I get around the Beach Boys, right? Well, why?
You're outing me on the air.
Well, again, that's just a generic example of the concept of what you mean and why. Not like you said, just because, I will give one of my answers. My first answer is Band on the Run. And the reason was because growing up, Babilo Island, an amusement park in the Detroit area of Island off of Amherstburg, Ontario, Canada. Now, past 9/11, it could never exist because of all the security issues and whatnot. But we used to take the Babilo boat out and back, and that song played a lot on the Babilo boat. So that ended up being the first 45 RPM record, for those who remember what those are, that I ever bought, to go on to the thousands of pieces of vinyl that are in my collection today. So, and I ramble a little bit about that, but that's the details, the context of the why.
It's what makes the show tick. 100%.
Okay, now you mentioned the other one, guy, a car, and what was it?
A guy, a car, and a podcast. My last show.
Was there another one also in there between, or just the two?
I mean, I've guessed it on, I don't know, maybe a dozen podcasts, but no, just me personally, me like hosting and making it. Now, I don't know if I consider it a podcast, but I made a documentary film using a guy, a car, and a podcast as the vehicle to do it. So that documentary that I mentioned that I made about going back and tracing the steps of my mission, like that's a product of a guy, a car, and a podcast, because I basically set up a bunch of podcasts interviews with a bunch of people connected to that experience for me, and then shot a whole trip of me going back to Pittsburgh where I served my mission, and just me going to all the different apartments and stuff. Yeah. And then I edited the footage of the actual physical journey in with the clips of me talking to these people where we were talking about things that were specific to, certain spaces and times. So I don't know if a podcast documentary is a thing. My ego led me to believe that I'd created a new genre of film when I did it, but it's still a guy, a car, and a podcast. But that existed, between the start of that one and Heart Songs.
And starting to wrap things up, people can find that and other things at.
You're about to get a softball curve thrown right at your head.
Yeah, so it's not your name. It's Blaylock.com. Yeah, no,
here's how it works. My last name is Blaylock. You got that 100% right. A long time ago, a guy that I was friends with, that was a drummer in a band, he called me just levitously. He called me Blayrock. Just took my last name and turned it into something awesome. I thought it was great, so I've used it for like my production companies and stuff. So Blayrock.com is where you can find all this stuff. Blayrock.
Yeah. And I've got that on your email, but I'm writing it in big block letters so that when I add it to the Buzzsprout transcript extended show notes, it'll be typed right. And probably it'll be on the scroll across the bottom of the video versions when I edit. But, I think James Corden kind of stole your gig with his carpool karaoke.
Oh, yeah.
And also now Jimmy Fallon, on Fox does a taxi driver routine with interviewing people in the back, which I think kind of is a steal of Cash Cab.
Yeah. Probably not as good of a one either. Cash Cab is awesome.
Yeah, that was rather interesting, different. Yeah, I remember watching that. I don't know if it's still on or not, but it was an interesting format. So indeed, anyway, Adam Blaylock at Blayrock.com is where people reach you.
You got it.
All right. Well, thank you, Adam, for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. It's a good, for those looking on the video, they could see you're in your car with cars whizzing by. Yeah. Thankfully, you haven't crashed. Yeah. Be careful out there, please.
Yeah. Will do.
Take care. God bless.
You too.
Thank you for having tuned in for Constitutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help